The rain was coming down hard when he saw her collapse beside the road, his 3 babies crying in the back seat, his gas light blinking, and a choice in front of him that would change everything. She wasn't moving. Cars sped past. And for one terrifying second, he wondered if stopping would cost his children everything. If stories of ordinary people making extraordinary choices move you, you're in the right place. Take a second to subscribe to True Kindness Tales, share this video with someone who needs hope today, and let us know in the comments what kindness means to you as you listen to what happened next. It started on a gray Tuesday afternoon in a quiet stretch of Pennsylvania highway that most people barely noticed. He was a single dad in his early 30s, exhausted in a way only parents understand, especially parents doing it alone. 3 toddlers meant 3 car seats, 3 bottles, 3 sets of tiny shoes that always went missing, and 3 little hearts that depended on him completely. His wife had passed away during childbirth, leaving him with triplets and a grief so heavy it sometimes felt like he was carrying an extra person on his back everywhere he went. That afternoon, he was coming back from a pediatric appointment in the next town over. 1 baby had been teething and crying nonstop, another had fallen asleep with a fist clenched around a stuffed giraffe, and the third was fussing just enough to keep his nerves on edge. He was calculating in his head how much formula he had left at home, whether he could make it until payday, and if the old car would survive another winter. The rain began as a mist and then turned into a steady downpour. Windshield wipers squeaked in protest. Traffic thinned out, and the road curved into a long, lonely stretch lined with trees and soaked grass. That's when he noticed something unusual ahead. At first, he thought it was debris. Then he saw a car pulled over at an awkward angle, hazard lights flashing weakly, and a woman standing beside it, gripping the door as if it were the only thing holding her upright. He slowed down instinctively. As he got closer, she staggered, took a step away from the car, and then collapsed onto the wet shoulder of the road. Just like that. No drama. No sound he could hear over the rain. Just a body hitting the ground and not getting back up. His heart slammed into his chest. His first thought wasn't heroic or noble. It was practical and panicked. I have 3 babies in the car. What if this is dangerous? What if she's already gone? What if stopping puts us all at risk? He glanced in the rearview mirror at the tiny faces depending on him, their lives wrapped up in his next decision. Cars passed. 1. 2. 3. Some slowed. None stopped. The baby started crying louder, feeding off his tension. He pulled over anyway. He parked as close as he could, threw on his hazards, and jumped out into the rain. The cold soaked through his jacket instantly. He ran to her side and knelt, his knee sinking into the muddy grass. She was pale, her skin cold to the touch, her lips slightly blue. He called out to her, his voice shaking. No response. He checked for breathing and felt the faintest rise and fall. Relief hit him so hard it almost made him dizzy. He called 911 with one hand while trying to shield her face from the rain with the other. He gave the location, explained she was unconscious, and begged them to hurry. The dispatcher stayed calm, guiding him through what to do until help arrived. He took off his jacket and draped it over her, even though the cold immediately bit into his arms. Back at the car, the triplets were screaming now, confused and scared. He ran back and forth, torn between comforting them and staying with her. He talked to them the whole time, telling them it was okay, that Daddy was right there, even though his own voice trembled. The ambulance took longer than he expected. Every minute felt like 10. He worried about hypothermia. He worried about his kids. He worried about everything. When the sirens finally cut through the rain, he felt his knees weaken with relief. Paramedics rushed in, taking over with practiced efficiency. They thanked him briefly, loaded her onto a stretcher, and asked if he knew her name. He didn't. All he knew was that she was alive when they took her away. Before the ambulance doors closed, one of the paramedics looked at him and said, "You did the right thing. A lot of people don't stop." He stood there in the rain for a moment after they left, heart pounding, clothes soaked, babies crying, wondering if he'd just done something brave or reckless. Then he buckled his kids in tighter, whispered a promise to keep them safe, and drove home. Life went on, because it had to. Days blurred into nights filled with feedings, laundry, and exhaustion. Money stayed tight. Sleep stayed scarce. The memory of that afternoon faded into the background, filed away with all the other moments that had tested him since becoming a single parent. Weeks later, his phone rang while he was trying to coax all 3 babies down for a nap. The number was unfamiliar. He almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and asked if he was the man who had stopped on Route 17 during the storm. His stomach dropped. For a split second, he worried something had gone wrong, that maybe he'd done something incorrectly. Then the voice said the woman had woken up. She had suffered a sudden medical emergency while driving, lost consciousness, and would not have survived if she'd been left there in the cold rain much longer. She had asked, repeatedly, about the men who stopped, about the children she heard crying while drifting in and out, about whether he was okay. He sat down on the couch, one baby in his arms, the other 2 finally asleep, and listened in stunned silence. A few days later, she asked if she could meet him. They met in the hospital cafeteria. He almost didn't recognize her. She looked healthier, stronger, but her eyes filled with tears the moment she saw him. She walked over slowly, as if afraid he might disappear. She thanked him, over and over, her voice breaking. She told him she remembered thinking she was going to die alone on the side of the road, rain hitting her face, cars passing by. Then she remembered hearing a man's voice, urgent and kind, and the sound of babies crying. That sound, she said, reminded her she wasn't alone. Over coffee that he didn't have to pay for, she asked about his life. And for the first time in a long while, he told the truth. About losing his wife. About raising triplets alone. About working nights and still coming up short. About the fear that sometimes crept in late at night when all 3 were finally asleep and the house was too quiet. She listened without interrupting, her hands wrapped tightly around her cup. She told him her story too. She was a successful businesswoman, driven, always in a rush, always focused on the next deal, the next goal. She admitted that before that day, she rarely noticed people on the side of the road, literal or metaphorical. She had believed kindness was important, but distant, something abstract. Waking up in a hospital bed, knowing a stranger with nothing to gain had stopped for her while carrying the weight of 3 tiny lives, changed something deep inside her. What happened next didn't come all at once. It unfolded slowly, naturally, the way real change usually does. She helped him find better childcare options. She connected him with resources he didn't know existed. She showed up, not as a savior, but as someone who genuinely cared. Over time, opportunities appeared that he never would have imagined asking for. A more stable job with flexible hours. Help fixing his old car. A safety net he had never had before. She insisted it wasn't repayment. She said it was participation. Participation in a world where people stop. The triplets grew. They learned to walk, then run. They laughed easily, unaware of how close their lives had come to a very different path. The man who once stood shaking in the rain found himself standing a little taller, not because his life had become perfect, but because he'd been reminded that kindness could ripple outward in ways no one could predict. Years later, he would tell his children about that rainy day. Not as a story about danger or fear, but as a story about choice. About how sometimes doing the right thing feels terrifying. About how love isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just pulling over when everyone else keeps driving. The woman never forgot either. She carried the memory with her into boardrooms and busy days, letting it slow her down just enough to notice people again. She started stopping. Listening. Helping quietly, without cameras or applause. What began as a single moment on a roadside became a thread woven into many lives, unseen but strong. Kindness doesn't always announce itself. It often shows up when we're tired, scared, and unsure, asking something from us when we feel we have nothing left to give. But as this story reminds us, kindness is never wasted. It has a way of circling back, of lifting others and ourselves in the process. If this story moved you, let it be a gentle nudge to stop when you can, to care when it's inconvenient, and to share your own moments of kindness in the comments. You never know whose life, or how many lives, might change because you did.